Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to help you finish your Christmas shopping list and let everyone else over there stiff-arm their competition while trying to fight off that tryptophan on Turkey Night. Now, what we did was we partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get up to 75% off over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles during this holiday season. They have something for everyone. But how is RSA able to offer such great deals on JSA authentication, you ask? Well, they do this by making deals directly with athletes so there are no extra markups, and they choose to then pass that savings on to you, the customer. Now, all orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. But hurry up because customers are so stark raving mad for RSA that memorabilia sells out daily. All you have to do is head over to shoprsa.com/SHN. Again, that's shoprsa.com/SHN. So don't wait to bring home your favorites and own a piece of sports history for you and the loved ones on your shopping list this holiday season. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
The Rose Bowl. The game that inspired the college football bowl season has a long and storied history. The stadium itself is 100 years old, and in celebration of it, Pigskin Dispatch is assembling some of the top historians and authors to share the memories, people, and events that make the granddaddy of them all the special game that it is. Enjoy this Rose Bowl memory from pigskindispatch.com.
Football friends, this is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we are going to pick up on a conversation that we had just a couple days ago with author Timothy P. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com. We thank Tim for joining us. And he's going to keep on explaining these two military Rose Bowls we had in a row. 2 days ago, in that episode, he talked about the Rose Bowl of 1918, the 1917 season and the military that was going on there with the two military teams. And he's continuing his topic on one that we talked about yesterday with Joe Ziemba, but they both talk a little bit about some different aspects of this 1919 Rose Bowl and the 1918 collegiate season. So I think you're going to enjoy this chat with Timothy P. Brown, as always.
I think the 1918 season was the oddest in the history of football, and for two primary reasons. One is that throughout the summer, the Army had been talking with and training folks at the vast majority of American colleges about this program called the Students Army Training Corps. So it's SATC. And all along, they had been saying that this was going to be voluntary. If somebody wants to join, they can join. And basically, it's going to be something like ROTC. You get paid, you wear a uniform, yada, yada. You take some military courses, but you remain a college student. Well, right before, early September, all of a sudden they announced, no, we've changed our mind. This is going to be, essentially it's mandatory. So if the school signed up to participate in this program, all able-bodied men who were students had to be members of this SATC. And so, and then they had tremendous restrictions on the soldiers, on student soldiers. They had to take specified classes. Their day was laid out for them, just like being in the Army, right? their weekends were pretty much laid out for them. They couldn't be gone from campus, more than about a 10-hour period on Saturdays. And so the implication of all that was, how the heck are we going to play football games under those conditions? Because they didn't have much time to practice. And so a lot of teams just didn't play at all. Or, others played, but they kind of considered it an SATC team rather than a real varsity team. But most schools went and carried on. But all of a sudden you had this thing going on where everybody had to reschedule themselves, because they had planned either they were going to be traveling or somebody else was going to be traveling, to get to the game. So all you could really do is play neighboring schools, or the other people who also got real attractive, which is kind of counterintuitive, but military teams, they weren't restricted. So they were the ones who did the traveling, which is it's like, okay, we can't let the students travel, but we do let the military guys travel, which really made no sense, but that's kind of the way it worked out. So you have that going on, plus, and so people rejiggered their schedule, and like Mare Island, started off, they were playing a bunch of teams in the Bay Area. They played St. Mary's, and I think they played Cal twice, two weekends in a row, things like that. And out on the eastern side of the country, there was a big training facility called Great Lakes, just north of Chicago. And they ran into the same kind of thing, but they started their season, and most of the teams they played during the season were Big Ten schools. They opened with Iowa, then they played Illinois, they played Northwestern later on, they played Notre Dame. But they, as kind of, so they had to rejigger their schedule. And then about 4 weeks into the season, this thing called the Spanish flu arrives. And so it starts rolling across the country. And, some places got hit real hard early on and then not too much after, and others, waited, another month or so. So just depending on what was happening in each community, this schedule that you just rejiggered, the health authorities might say, hey, you can't play this year, or you can't play this weekend in the state of Michigan or in the state of Missouri or whatever it may have been. So, I mean, schedules were just a mess. Great Lakes traveled to Pitt to play a game, and they arrive, they practice, and then the authorities say, no games. There were teams, Great Lakes played, one game. There were no spectators. Mare Island did that as well. So, you had a lot of those kinds of bizarre things going on. And through all of that, Great Lakes, for example, like I said, they had started, they had boatloads of talent, just extremely talented team. And they start the season with some Big Ten teams. They do okay. They tie here and there. Then we get all the Spanish flu things going on. And eventually they demote the coach, a guy named Bo Alcott, who had been Kansas's coach, prior to the war. And a guy who was an ex-Navy player takes over, McReevy. So then, Great Lakes is like, people think this is a really talented team, but can they really put it together? They go to Rutgers, and they're playing, the Paul Robeson Rutgers team, and the New York writers are thinking Rutgers is going to blow the doors off of Great Lakes, and just the opposite happens. So they won like whatever it was, 46-14 or something, and that's a lot of points in that, during that time period. Then they go down the next week to play Navy, and Navy basically was beating them most of the game. They were up 6-0 with 2 or 3 minutes left, and Navy's like inside the 2. They run the ball. Their ball carrier gets hit. The ball pops up in the air, and a Great Lakes guy grabs it, starts running the other way, And as he's running, he's got open field, and one or two guys, kind of his own guys, trailing him. And as he's running along, the Navy coach is saying, "Get him, get him, get him!" And so a guy pops off the bench, tackles him, and so then a quick little fight breaks out. And the academy commandant or commandant comes out and says, "This is a touch." The rules didn't really allow for the refs to award a touchdown, but the commander said, "This is what's going to happen," and that is what happened. So they awarded Great Lakes a touchdown. They make the extra point, and they end up winning the game. So they're and then literally in the locker room after that win, they get the invitation to go to the Rose Bowl. So
it's almost a precursor to what today we know as the eye in the sky, where a higher power trumps an officiating crew. We sort of have it back in that World War I era.
Yeah. So Great Lakes is fortunate because they basically have their invitation before Thanksgiving, and they play another game or two. They played Purdue, I think, after that, and so their season's done. They can rest and kind of relax. Mare Island, on the other hand, the Spanish flu is causing further problems out on the West Coast. So they've started the season, then they take like a month off, and then they were all like they couldn't leave the base. So then they take a trip north, and they're playing kind of anybody who they could get, who also could guarantee the gate, because this is a self-funding thing. So they had to make sure that there's a big enough gate in order to justify playing. So they play play their full schedule, they end up undefeated, and so they're thinking they're going to the Rose Bowl, for the second year. But the Rose Bowl people are like, well, they weren't necessarily excited about having the same team. Plus, there are a couple of other teams that potentially could claim, other military teams that potentially could claim, stake a claim to it. So anyways, they end up, they set up a tournament. So it was basically playoffs for the Western Service Championship. And the odd thing is there were 5 teams. So it wasn't really a round robin. I mean, the guys who set it up didn't know what they were doing, but and then they ran into some issues of like, well, when this team beat this team and this team beat that team, it wasn't like a real clear marker. But eventually they play this, Mare Island had to play 2 games, including on Christmas Day. So while Great Lakes is chilling out on the train coming on out to Pasadena, they're still playing, and they get a bunch of injuries and stuff. And so, and their quarterback and his brother end up with the flu. So they, the quarterback doesn't even play in the Rose Bowl. But eventually, Mare Island wins the tournament, and they get to play Great Lakes. Now, the other thing that's just kind of, you talked about precursors of what's coming down the road. One of my favorite little stories about that team in the 1919 Rose Bowl is that by the time the football season was ending, the war was over, right? Because it ended November 11th, and so at that point there was nothing the Marine commanders across the nation wanted more than to beat Great Lakes in the Rose Bowl. Once they knew that Mare Island was playing, so Mare Island was able to get a couple of players transferred into Mare Island at the last minute. One guy from up in Washington at Bremerton, and then 2 guys from the Philadelphia Naval Yard. So they get transferred out, and they literally had just a couple of days to practice with the Mare Island team. And but one of the guys, a guy named John Budd, ends up playing in the NFL. So these were some pretty talented guys. So it was just kind of cool that there were these free agents in the military, back in 1918. But whereas Mary Island dominated the 1918 game. Kind of the flip side. They were on the flip side in 1919. They just didn't. Like I said, they were beat up. Certain guys had to leave the game early, and so Great Lakes wins 17-0. But the Great Lakes team, and so the guy who gets named the best player in the game was Patty Driscoll, who played in the NFL and was the head coach in the NFL. But the guy who down the road, when they named MVPs of previous games, the guy who got the MVP award was George Hallis. So Patty Driscoll should have gotten it, but George is who ended up getting it. So, but just a couple of quick things about these games in general. There were, one of the guys who played for Mare Island in the 18 game. The team that played for Mare Island, the bulk of them end up in battle, and a number of them are wounded. One of the guys who had been considered the best rugby player in the nation, a guy from Cal, is killed in action. There's a couple of other guys or a number of other guys who were wounded, during the conflict. But that Marine team, while a guy who was on the Mare Island team early in the season, but not on the Rose Bowl, he was also, he was killed in action as well. But the guys who played in the game, of the 11 starters, 5 of them ended up becoming Marine generals, which is just an incredible, incredible circumstance. I mean, that just is not, is not the norm. And then Great Lakes, especially, they had there, a couple of guys from either Camp Lewis or Mare Island played in the early NFL. But I think Great Lakes had, like 10 guys who played in the NFL. They had a guy named Dick Reichel, George Hallis, and Patty Driscoll on their team. And they're the only 3 guys who started in the Rose Bowl, started in the NFL, and played in the major leagues. So that guy, Reichel, he played in the opening series when Yankee Stadium first opened. And in the first game, a guy named Babe Ruth hits a home run. And then Sunday game, Reichel hit a home run. So he was the second guy to hit a home run in the world, or in Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium. And then 6 different guys, 5 guys off of Great Lakes became NFL head coaches. Another, Dick Hanley from Mare Island was a head coach of, a number of places, Haskell and then Northwestern, and he was the head coach of the Chicago Rockets in the AAFC. So, it's just really a pretty supremely talented group of guys who, played at a time when, hey, the world was at war, and especially guys in the 1918 game, a lot of those guys saw battle, and then from all 4 teams, a number of these guys re-enlisted or rejoined during World War II, and either saw action or were training officers, things along those lines. So a lot of patriotic fellows.
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of talent and a lot of football history in both those games, especially that 1919 game. Like you said, with the coaching trees and the players that went on to play in what would become the NFL, just a tremendous catalyst to sort of take football to a new era, a new level, and a new decade in the 1920s. So tremendous stuff. Tremendous.
So even just a couple of other names that people may not realize were on these teams, but Roy Andrews, who even like a year or 2 ago was still in the top 50 of NFL wins as a coach. Jimmy Conzelman, who coached a couple of different teams, even owned a team for a while. Hal Erickson, then George Hallis, Dick Hanley, and Patty Driscoll. And then, again, there's other guys who are just players, and successful players along the lines.
Well, great stuff as always, Tim. Really appreciate you. Maybe take this opportunity to let people know a little bit about football archaeology and how they can see your daily tidbits.
Yeah, so just football archaeology is a website. It's on the Substack. It's on Substack, if that means anything to you. So it's basically allows me to send an email or a newsletter, which I send out every night, which on kind of a quick little topic of football history, varies all over the place. It's stadiums, it's uniforms, it's equipment, it's guys, it's games, kind of whatever I come across. And then I write a couple of long form articles every month as well. It's more like 5 or 10 minute reads. So all of that's available. You just sign up, subscribe, and you'll get access to them every day. If you prefer not to do that, just go out to the site, roam around, or you can also follow me on Twitter at football archaeology, and everything that I post on the site, I also post on Twitter as well.
All right. Well, Tim Brown, thank you once again for joining us again. And we'll be talking again later this month on some more great Rose Bowl history. But thanks for sharing the Rose Bowl history and the knowledge, especially right in your wheelhouse of that military football that you wrote the great book on. Why don't you give us the name of that book again, too, so people can get that on Amazon?
Yeah, thanks. That book is Fields of Friendly Strife. It basically covers some of the background on football and the Rose Bowl, but then it gets into, talks both about the war, the seasons that these guys go through. So it's mostly focused on, through the eyes of these players, and then covers kind of what happened to all of them afterwards. So, whatever they did in life, I kind of, as much as I could, track down what happened to them all. And so it's all there in the appendix or in the content.
All right. Well, hey, make a great gift for the football fan in your life for Christmas here or during the holidays. So something else to look at, to order from Amazon. So Tim, thanks again for sharing, and we'll talk to you a little bit later this month.
Hey, very good. Thanks as always, Darren. Appreciate it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.